Hi there, welcome to this look at the Christmas 2020 weather prospects. In the UK, snow is more likely in January, February or March even than it is in December. Therefore, the classical Dickensian white Christmases that many people hope for are comparatively rare. Having said that, there have been a few good examples in recent decades, and this chart which I've got on screen here is the first one that I can remember. It's the Christmas Day chart for 1981, and some of you may know that was one of the coldest Decembers on record in the UK, and it was certainly one of the snowiest, if not the snowiest. We had frequent heavy falls of snow affecting much of the UK, and the cold weather, although it broke shortly after Christmas, did last for the big day itself. And as you can see on this chart, the UK on Christmas Day was under pretty cold upper level air, so that was certainly one to remember. The next one I personally can recall pretty well occurred in 1995, and you can probably just see here in the North Sea we've got this little area of low pressure, and that brought huge amounts of snow to parts of Scotland and parts of eastern England. In England, it was quite localised, if I recall correctly. I think most of the snow was confined to eastern coastal counties, and as it happens, that particular Christmas I was staying with my parents, who at the time were living near Filey in North Yorkshire, and I can remember very clearly how on Christmas Day the snow started to fall, and it kept falling and falling through the afternoon and the evening and overnight. And by Boxing Day, the hedges in the surrounding fields were absolutely buried by snow. And the cold weather lasted for several days afterwards with further snow showers in that area. So it was certainly one to remember. Having said that, I can remember driving into York a couple of days after Christmas. That's about 40 miles inland from the East Coast, and it was completely green there. There was no snow at all. Absolutely not even a flake had fallen as far as I could tell. So as I say, 95, absolutely cracking example of white Christmas in some places. In others, they completely missed the snow. We then move forward to the winter of 2009 and 2010. That was the coldest in the UK since 78-79. However, on Christmas Day itself, it had turned somewhat milder. I think about a week before Christmas Day itself, we had bitterly cold weather and heavy snowfall, certainly in parts of southern and central England where I was living here in the Chilterns. I think we had about 20 centimetres of snow on the 18th of December, and then another 15 or so 3 or 4 days later. But by Christmas Day itself, the snow was rapidly melting, at least around here, but there was still some on the ground, but certainly it wasn't a classic white Christmas. Ironically, we didn't have to wait long for a classic one. In fact, it came the next year in 2010, and as some of you will, needless to say, recall, that turned out to be the coldest December. I think at least I think it was probably the coldest December on record. It was colder than December 1981, even though it's probably less snowy. And here in the Chilterns, we had a heavy fall of snow. I think it was around about the 20th of December or thereabouts. And the days after it were ice days, so temperatures didn't rise above freezing. And Christmas Day itself was bitterly cold. I think I recorded a maximum temperature here of about -2 or -3. So it really was cold, and I believe it was in much of the UK the coldest Christmas Day on record. However, since then it's really been a different story. There hasn't been a classic white Christmas. It's a decade. Incredible to think it's a decade since the 2010 white Christmas, but there we go. Time really does fly. So can we expect to see a more promising outlook this year? Okay, well, I'm going to start off by taking a look at the latest 16-day GEFS ensemble postage stamp plots showing maximum temperatures. Now, these go out to the 18th of December, so a week short of Christmas, obviously, and you may be thinking, well, what's the point of looking at these when we're only going out to the 18th of December? Well, there are two things here. This data is very, very fresh. It's only become available in the last few hours. And secondly, it starts to give some indications about what the lead up to Christmas itself will be like. Could we expect a significant cold spell, or are we going to be locked into a mild Atlantic-driven southerly, southwesterly, westerly type flow? Once those lock in, they do tend to last for a long time, or they can last for a long time. So if we just look at each of these stamps, they're showing the forecast maximum temperature on Friday the 18th of December, and hopefully you can see that they just cover the UK area. We've got values on the first one of between 7, 8, 9, 10 Celsius, so not particularly cold. The second one, very similar. The third, the fourth, mild in the south, colder in the north. The fifth, probably the fifth one here, somewhat colder, milder, colder, and we keep going through these. I'm not going to go through all of them. The important thing is just to pick up the trends. Are there many which are showing particularly cold weather? That's what I would be looking at. Well, the answer to that is, if we keep scrolling down, you'll see several have temperatures in the low single figures, but certainly none of them are suggesting maximum temperatures are below freezing. So we're not looking at ice days, at least in the run up to Christmas. And I think to summarize what this is showing is the likelihood of temperatures being close to average, or possibly a little bit below, possibly a little bit above, but it doesn't look like there's much sign of it being very cold at this stage. If I just flip onto the next chart here, it's for the same time, but it's actually for the next day. But it shows, so Saturday the 19th of December, and it's shown the snow forecast from each of the computer model runs in the GEFS ensemble. Again, what I'd be hoping to see here is lots of these individual stamps showing snowfall. Snowfall's highlighted by pink shading on these plots. If you read the footnotes below this video on YouTube, you'll see the links I've posted, so you can keep an eye on these as Christmas approaches. They do provide a good source of information. So just scrolling across, we've got one here showing snow on Saturday the 19th, another one in Scotland, another one in Scotland, possibly further south with some pink shading very faintly appearing there. Another one, Scotland, Northern Ireland. This perturbation here right in the middle of the screen is showing more widespread snow, but as you can see if I scroll down, it is not really well supported by any of the other. It isn't supported at all. In actual fact, it's the odd one out. So that essentially, in ensemble forecasting terms, means it's very unlikely to be correct. In fact, at this stage, most of them, the vast majority of the individual runs, are not showing snow across lowland Britain. A greater number of them are showing snow over the Scottish Highlands, which is what you would expect. If I now just quickly move us forward, this is the GEFS 35-day model, which does cover the Christmas period. The downside to this is that the data is 24 hours old. It takes a lot longer to run the model out to 35 days rather than 16. So we're always perhaps one step behind with a 35-day model, because it was initiated, in this case, yesterday, which at the time of recording is the 2nd of December. So nonetheless, it's a upper air temperature anomaly forecast chart for the entire week beginning the 23rd of December. So remember, within this period, within this week, it could be saying that some days are going to have mild upper level air over the UK, some days are going to have cold, some days average. The point here is that it's averaging out all the ensemble model runs across the entire period of a week. So what we actually have is, and this has changed a little bit in recent days, there had been a negative anomaly appearing. This latest update is showing that the negative anomaly is really confined to Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and perhaps southern counties of England. But in general, the 850 HPA temperature anomaly across the UK for Christmas week, based on this forecast, is pretty much non-existent. It's saying the mean is slap bang in line with the 30-year average. Not particularly hopeful, of course, if you're keeping your fingers crossed for snow this Christmas Day. But as I say, it is the average for the week as a whole. So I thought the next thing that may be useful quickly looking at is the individual 35-day plots for a number of UK cities. I'll start with London. This one shows 850 HPA temperatures. Again, you can see hopefully this is the area where on the horizontal axis where Christmas Day falls. Hopefully that's readable. And you can see the mean of all the runs there is very close to a 30-year average, which really fits in with the chart I was just showing you. It's useful here though because we can also look at 2-meter temperatures, so the temperatures we experience down at the ground level, and you can see the red lines for 2 of them show the average maximum temperature and the average minimum temperatures through the 35-day period. So you see there's obviously a spread, and the green shading is showing effectively the extent of the spread, with most of the runs falling within the green shading. And what we can see on Christmas Day here is the temperature spread ranges from about plus 6, 7, 8 Celsius, somewhere around here, Christmas Day. That's maximum temperature, with a minimum down to around just above freezing. So you've got to remember, as I say, that's averaging things out, but most runs are falling within this range. The ones which are outside it are excluded. So it's pointing towards fairly, I would suggest, fairly average conditions, possibly a little bit colder than the norm. Not great if it's snow that you're looking for, I think. Now just scroll down to the precipitation part of this chart so we can get a feel for, is it going to be wet or not during the Christmas period. You can see the red line on this chart shows the mean of all the mean forecast precipitation from all the runs. It does not look particularly wet. Clearly some of the individual runs are suggesting there will be rain around, or let's call it precipitation, because then we're not excluding snow, but it doesn't look particularly wet. So average temperatures favoured, maybe slightly below, not particularly wet in London. Let me just jump up here to Manchester, and again I'll be fairly brief here because it's a similar picture. We can see upper air temperatures probably a little below the 30-year average on Christmas Day, or that's the most likely scenario according to this. Scroll down to the 2-meter temperatures. We can see rather cold conditions are favoured. Maximum values of the maximum mean value about 5 Celsius tucked in there. The minimum mean value around 2 Celsius. So again, rather cold, not very cold. We've got some runs, the standard deviation with most runs showing the range between about 7 or 8 Celsius maximum and down to about -1 overnight as a minimum in the range that's forecast. If I just bring us down to the precipitation part of this, the scale's a little bit different to the London one, but again it does not look particularly wet. So again, quite a similar picture to London. On balance, possibly a degree or so colder. Again, though, I wouldn't be favouring a white Christmas based on this data. Let me just quickly look at Newcastle, going over to the northeast of England. I actually used to live in Sunderland for a number of years, and I can remember, surprisingly, some people may think snow is pretty rare near to the northeast coast. It becomes a lot more common as you as you head further inland towards Newcastle itself and west into the higher ground there. And what we can see here is a similar picture, upper air temperatures. If I bring us down to the 2 metre temperatures, Christmas Day, well, very, very similar to what we were just looking at. Nothing really jumping here. Precipitation, very similar again. Okay, so not great for Newcastle. Edinburgh, the last city which I'll look at briefly, and there again it's very, very similar on the 850 HPA temperature plot. 2 metre temperatures, a little bit lower. We've got the mean ranging from a maximum of the mean maximum is around about 4 Celsius, and the minimum around 1 or 2 Celsius. So a little bit more promising, you would think, perhaps, but again, certainly you wouldn't be stacking the odds in favour of snow. If I bring us down to the precipitation, not particularly wet, according to most of the model runs. Risk of precipitation, risk of rain or snow, but it's not a particularly wet picture which has been forecast here. Okay, so where do we go if we want to increase the odds of snow in the UK? Well, I'll just briefly show you the difference. This plot is for the Cairngorms, it's labelled, so the Cairngorm Mountains in Scotland. Much higher altitude, and snow, of course, there is a lot more frequent than in most parts of the UK. So much so that there's some pretty good skiing to be had there when the snow arrives. And if we see the upper air temperatures for Christmas Day, well, the mean is around -5, so it's a bit lower at the 850 HPA level than the other charts. Now, if we look at the 2 metre temperatures, this is really where the difference starts to show. We can see that the maximum mean is around 0 Celsius, with the minimum mean at around -2. So that's looking more promising. If I just bring us down to the precipitation chart, the vertical axis is scaled a little bit differently here because it's generally a wetter picture. So the scale takes that into account. And if we look at around the Christmas Day, the 25th of December, it's not particularly wet, but on average, the runs in the GEFS are suggesting a higher risk of precipitation than for the other locations. If we take into account the temperatures, this is unsurprisingly going to be my favoured location for snow this Christmas in the UK. No big surprises there, I guess, but there we have it. Now, if I can just summarise this, it's too early to make a confident forecast. Often we have to wait until maybe the 15th or the 20th of December before the trends start to firm up. So this is very speculative. I'd say there's a slightly higher than normal chance of Christmas coinciding with below average temperatures, or maybe slightly below average temperatures would be a better way of describing it. As I suggested on those ensemble plots, it's not looking particularly cold, but maybe a couple of degrees below the norm in much of the country would be favoured at the present time. So taking that into account, the probability is that most of lowland Britain isn't going to have a white Christmas. At this stage, that's what the probabilities are favouring. As is often the case, there's a much higher chance of snow in the Scottish Highlands. So I think that looks like a good bet for snow this year, but perhaps not in most other parts of the United Kingdom. It could change, and if it does, I'll produce another video which looks at this in a little bit more detail soon. Okay, so thank you for watching this. If you liked the video, please hit the subscribe button below. Thanks now, bye.